My first book actually came out after my husband died, and it was mostly about the garden. And my second book came out of my reaction to my husband's death. After he died, every time I brought up what had happened, they said, you have to write about that. And what had happened was that I was married for 40 years. I had what I thought of as a happy marriage. I used to say to my students, I hope you have when they were getting married, I hope you have as happy a marriage as I had. And 2 weeks after he died at home. He had pancreatic cancer, and which is a death warrant, was and probably still is. And it's very fast. It goes about 5 months. And so the minute he came with the diagnosis, we knew that it was happening. So it wasn't like it was a shock, but he stayed home. He didn't go to the hospital. He died here. And 2 weeks later, I found myself skipping down the street, and I was really, really stunned. When I finally began to be able to say, I'm really okay, you know, I'm not, you don't have to treat me so tenderly, people said, Joan, you have to write about this. Nobody tells the truth about this. Nobody writes about this. And finally, I sort of thought I had a book, which began with some chapters about this whole thing about losing my husband, and then about how I behaved afterwards, and then there are some little stories about other fellow creatures on the planet, and some things about getting older. When I realized that I didn't miss him, my husband, after he died, I was very slow to try to talk to anybody about it at all. I was very embarrassed. I was very upset. I didn't know what to say. He never talked to me about dying. He never talked to me about what he wanted done with his art. He wouldn't have nothing to do with the reality. He was in denial the whole time and performing until the end. We had about 10 people here. He had performed. He'd walked them down to the riverbank. He'd shown them the community garden. I mean, he was 10 days from death. He was yellow with jaundice. And I realized after they left, he just collapsed. And I was on the phone with a friend, and I said, I resent it so much. I so much resent the fact that he has nothing for me. Nothing. He won't even talk to me. He won't even give me anything. And he has all this for all these other people. And she said, have you said that to him? And I said, no. She said, you need to talk to him about it. So the next morning, we were waiting for more people to arrive, and we sat outside on a bench. And I put my arm around him, and I said, sweetie, it's driving me crazy. I said, you know, you have all this for other people, and for me, you have absolutely nothing. You have nothing to say. And he burst into tears, and he said, I know I'm doing that. I will be here for you when you're in the garden. I will be here for you. I will. And he fell asleep. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't get it out. He couldn't face what was happening to him, really, you know. So none of that's in the book. I started writing it because I was trying to understand why I felt the way I did after my husband died. In the end, the book I've put together is not just a book about that. It's a book about getting old. It's a book about aging. It's a book about the world coming to a terrible state, to being in a terrible state, and how you cope with that, and how you learn to adapt to it. A lot of what I'm talking about is being a grown-up in a very childish age.